Hi, everybody, and welcome back to HCD Mindset Season 2. This is our YouTube vidcast where we have curious conversations about various topics in consumer and marketing research. But today we're going a little bit different, not entirely different, but we've been doing a series of interviews with people that we know in the industry or that we've worked with in the past. And today we're honored to have Karen Jagoda join us. So hi, Karen, and welcome.
Hi, ladies. Nice to meet you and nice to be on the show.
Thank you. So this will be a really cool conversation. So without further ado, let's launch right into things. As you know, for those of you that have already joined us on this journey, my name is Michelle Niedziela, PhD of Behavioral Neuroscience and VP of Research and Innovation at HCD. And as always, I am joined by Kathryn Ambroze.
Hi, everyone. Yep, Kathryn Ambroze here. I am the manager of Behavioral and Marketing Sciences, as always. And we're just going to share a little bit about HCD before we touch on all the cool stuff that Karen does.
Yes. So HCD, as many of you already know, but for those of you that are new, we are a market and consumer sciences research house. We measure consumers as they perceive, evaluate, and respond to different types of stimuli. That stimuli may be actual products or ingredients that go in products, packaging, communications, all those sort of things that go in marketing and consumer research. We do all of our work globally. We can do it in person or online. We also use applied consumer neuroscience, which is a mix of traditional marketing research tools, as well as neuroscience and psychology tools to look at how consumers interact with different types of stimuli, anything from the early stages of product development and exploration, all the way through to the validation and the marketing side on the end side of the product. But that's not what we're talking about today. Today, we are talking with Karen. First of all, a little bit of who you are, Karen. So give us a little bit of background. I know that you have a lot of things going on constantly. I've been on your podcast that I'd love for you to talk about a little bit, but your main area is in politics, yes?
Well, I started the eVoter Institute back in 1998 when we did the eVoter 98 study about the impact of online advertising for a political candidate. And at the same time, a lot was happening on the internet in general. So I proceeded to learn more about online advertising, online outreach, social media, and we published 2 books, Crossing the River and About Face. That was about the early days of the internet in this political space. And then I moved to La Jolla, California, where there's a lot of biotech and genetic work being done. So about 2007, I started the Digital Politics podcast. Actually, it was called the Digital Politics Radio at the time, because podcasts didn't really exist then.
Oh, yeah.
And I did this program with the local newspaper here, the Union Tribune, San Diego Union Tribune. And it was a live radio show with, sort of advertising and hard stops. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I had some fun. And podcasts continued to develop. And as a result of being here and knowing how to do podcasts, I also started the Empowered Patient podcast. And so now I do 2 podcasts, one about digital politics and the other about healthcare and advances in biotech and biopharmaceutical and medical devices. So it's ironic to me that the world of COVID-19 has brought so many of these subjects together. And we talk about politics on the COVID-19 related health shows, and we talk about COVID-19 on the politics shows. So
You're talking about COVID-19 a lot, I guess.
Yeah, so I live in a world of convergence. I've always looked at connecting the dots out there. When I started eVoter in 98, there were a lot of dots that indicated that the internet, digital, could be useful for political campaigns, and everybody said, no, that was ridiculous. So I've learned a lot over the last 20, 25 years when it comes to technology and applying it to both politics now as well as to healthcare.
Wow, there's a lot to talk about there for sure. Now, the question I like to ask on these interviews is, what did you want to be when you grew up? Was it a podcaster?
No, I really liked computers. I thought I was just going to be a computer nerd and do something with big data or something with computers. And My first career was at the Social Security headquarters in Baltimore, where I worked on and sort of fraud in general,
Mm,
but mostly about the computer side of things. But those were mainframes back in the day with terminals, where
yeah.
people used to paste their password next to their monitor so everybody could see it. And then I wanted to be in the technology business, so I sold microcomputers, Apples and IBM PCs back in the early '80s, and made some money and made a lot of friends and learned a lot about cables and circuit boards and monitors, and just decided I was good at sales. What I was really interested in was how to apply that kind of technology to other things like politics. So here I am.
And
So
what
were you,
translated over from that
yeah,
to what you're in now?
politics, yeah. Like where'd politics come in?
Well, when I was in college, I was also really interested in politics. And so I had a dual major. The political science department didn't talk to the math department because they had nothing in common. So I was originally a math major, which was just fine. But I also thought there was some applications for computers to politics, which seems a ridiculous statement now, but back then it was really revolutionary. And I'm talking
Yeah,
about in the '70s. So
that's really interesting because now it's like it's such a huge part, right? Like they're so intertwined, math, statistics, digital
right.
everything. It's truly amazing. So you were really, thinking ahead.
Well, I've been at this longer than I care to admit sometimes, and I learned to use a slide rule when I was in high school because that was before the days of calculators, for Pete's sake. So I don't really mean to age myself here, but a lot has really changed in a relatively short period of time, especially when it
Yeah.
comes to politics.
Yeah, especially you're talking about what happened, you started digital politics in 2007 and here we are 2020 and a huge amount has probably changed.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I first had very few people I could talk to about the subject, and now everybody's got something to say about the use of social media or digital politics when it comes to fundraising or getting out the vote or persuasion or whatever it is, registration, getting attendance at rallies, what have you.
Absolutely. That's really cool. And I think, it's so important because, we talk about like what influences consumers is kind of the side that we come from on HCD. But I think when we talk about voters, there's so much that's influencing them out there, especially maybe in this year, 2020, right? Which might be quite different than it was in 2007 or in 1999. When you look back in the 90s and the 80s, now sometimes people only get their news through social media.
And also, I'll give a little plug to HCD Research here. Uh, One of the things that we all know is that people oftentimes lie when they're asked a telephone survey or they're in a focus group or they're influenced by other people that are in the focus group with them. So one thing I like about the HCD technology is that it kind of pulls back the layers. And I think this kind of technology has changed the way we really understand what voters are thinking and intend to do, or what's really sort of stimulating them or turning them off. So
Yeah.
that's really where I see a lot of the technology sort of headed as well.
And maybe that's a really good question for you. How did you get to know HCD? Like it's obviously through Glenn, right? So how did you meet Glenn?
I I started eVoter Institute in 1998, and we did a lot of research related to voters and to political consultants. And somewhere along the line, uh, Glenn found me, or I found him, and we did some surveys using the HCD technology to get a sort of pulse of what voters were thinking about early use of social and just online fundraising. It all sounds so naive now when I think back, but these were hard questions to get people to answer back in
Yeah.
2000, 2001, 2002, 2003. We've been at this for a while, and we really stayed at the research until it kind of hit that curve point where it became more commonplace. And so it
Mhm.
wasn't so unique as it was in the early days. So Glenn and I have been sort of scratching at this question of what do voters really think and what do
Well, he
they
still
really
is,
do?
yeah.
Yeah. So,
Well, you're talking to the right people to figure out like the whole idea of combining different disciplines, because that is definitely something that I think has a lot of value. And
Mhm.
if everyone from different schools of thought approach the same question, I think that you get really interesting applications because everyone is coming at it from a different perspective and a different lens.
well, one thing about the political crowd is that they're very good at using the tools that won the last war, and they're
Mhm.
not particularly interested in trying new things, and they're, I would say, with great respect, risk adverse.
Yeah.
So this is not a crowd that embraces this kind of technology. And also, the old way of doing things has generated a lot of money for those companies who've built their reputations. So they're not so interested in changing that, might surprise their clients, and
Yeah.
give them results that they might not have expected using the old methods.
That's really interesting, that they wouldn't be interested, like, especially if we think about the last election where so many people were wrong in their predictions. The last election being 2016. I always have to remember this is being recorded. Who knows when people are listening to it? So yeah, so many people were wrong in their predictions that you would think, learning how to make maybe better predictions or understanding why those ended up not being correct, the approaches that they used before.
Well, I think that goes back a lot to who's in your sample and the bias. And I know, again, also HCD, that you are really strong in this implicit bias question and how that plays a role in who pollsters ask and how they ask the questions. So I think there needs to be a sort of reckoning there of not only what you ask, but who you ask, don't you think?
Yeah. Oh no,
Absolutely. And
absolutely.
also
And
how
how
you
you ask. Yeah, how you ask.
Jinx.
Yeah. Because I don't know about you guys, but I've been getting tons of text messages and phone calls right now. And I think with everybody, a lot of people don't even have house phones, landlines anymore. So I don't have a landline in my house. And I think that that really changes the way we screen our calls, right? So I'm always thinking about that, well, who are you measuring if the majority of people don't respond, you know?
Yeah. Well, also Facebook, I know, is having like every time I'm on my Facebook news feed, I see some type of a political ad in one way or another. And I think I've seen it there. I also see it on YouTube, that when you have those YouTube ads.
Yeah.
So they definitely
Instagram.
are. Yeah, exactly. It's definitely evolving from where it used to
Yeah.
just be, I think, strictly house phone calls. And they
Yeah.
are trying to, find new mediums to really
And
reach
maybe
those
we'll get
voters.
into this a little bit as we go through these slides, but another thing that I noticed is that a lot more almost grassroots approaches where candidates are starting to sort of post their thoughts in Facebook community groups. So, we have like our local town group or even our neighborhood group on Facebook, so you can see what's going on in your area. And candidates have been sort of campaigning for the past 2 years by posting information or posting thoughts, something try to be helpful. And they're doing it on these community groups. And that's certainly a different sort of approach to being
Mhm.
grassroots, I would assume.
Well, that's a good illustration of how the dynamic has changed, because in the old days, the candidates wondered if they even needed a website.
Right.
Then
Oh,
they
yeah.
created a website, but it was just like a fancy brochure, if it was even fancy. But it was, it's just kind of a picture, some links, and that was it. And they would never update it. Then they started updating it sort of begrudgingly. And now they have to go to other places to post information. And it kind of flips how people
Yeah.
find that information and how much trouble it is to find the information. So
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting evolution, actually.
Absolutely. I kind of wonder where it's all going, which, kind of brings us to this question. How has technology impacted? Do you think it's been, all positive? What are the most dramatic shifts you've seen in how technology has impacted politics?
I guess the most dramatic is the disinformation, misinformation, fake videos that's proliferating. It doesn't shock me. I'm disappointed, and I think it's about community standards and what can people get away with, and um, I think it'll find a balance point where people are sort of self-regulating, or there'll be regulations put on it. But I think more is more. So I encourage more voices. I just believe in civil discourse, and this whole idea of censorship and what's appropriate. That's a big, deep, murky pond to wade into. So I can't really comment about that. It's just that I think the companies who are putting those kinds of tools out there in the marketplace have some responsibility to make sure they're being used appropriately.
And how do the laws apply to that though? Like, I'm just thinking FCC laws around claims and stuff with consumer products. There's certain things you can't, do puffery about or have outright lies. What are some of the legalities of, for example, somebody puts out a negative ad that, cuts a video in a way that makes it seem, or maybe even actually doctors a video to make it seem like somebody said something that maybe they didn't.
Well, I think those rules apply to consumer products much more than they apply to political candidates, because I'm seeing all these really nasty ads, right? This guy's a crook, this guy's a communist, there's
surprising.
It's really just it's bald-faced lies in some cases, and we're even seeing the president using Dr. Fauci in his ad.
That's what I was thinking
which
of,
he was called on that, right? Yeah,
but it's still out there.
I saw it yesterday, so I can't really explain how someone could think that's okay, but
in the technology day and age that we're in, nothing ever really disappears, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. I guess that makes it, things are faster, but also they don't really go away. And so it ends up being, it seems like it's just really difficult to navigate. Sorry, Kathryn, you're going to say something.
Yeah, I was kind of curious because to touch on that too, it's because of these, like you said, possible misinformation that's spreading around, and there is misinformation spreading around. How do you feel that has changed the expectations of voters? Because now people are being previewed to all different types of contradicting information. And I think, do you think that is, how is that going to influence them?
Well, people have always gotten different information. It's just that we're getting so much information at such a rapid pace, and it's changing. So at some point you block it out, or you find the trusted sources and you sort of stick to those, and you sort of see how many people agree with that source and how many don't, and try to make your own decisions. But when I hear some of these people being interviewed, why they believe in QAnon, they look like normal people, but when they start talking, they're not normal people. These are people who are like living in another universe somehow. And I say that with great respect because they look like they're functioning humans, but I don't know how they can possibly believe some of the things they're saying, but people do, right? So I don't know,
There's a whole psychology around that, right? I mean, even with the misinformation that's put on Facebook, even fake Facebook groups that are being run by, international sources, whether it's from Russia or China or wherever it might be, they are able to tap into something, there's just enough to sort of hook someone in, and just enough believability to really get someone to say, it fits. I actually hear, even my dad has said on something that's so obviously not real, he said, well, it fits. It's like, well, that's not good enough,
just
right?
Assumption. Yeah.
And it's a good place for somebody who's an expert and with a PhD in neuroscience to actually add something to the story, because brains just function differently and we process information differently. And so it seemed to me yesterday, my husband and I worked on our ballots, and when we got to the end of all the ballot initiatives, he said, okay, great. Now all the direct mail that comes, we can just throw it directly in the trash can because we've already made up our minds. And so I think in some ways that's what you have to do. You have to decide what you think is reality and be open to conflicting views or additional information, but you have to start someplace, and it can't
But you
just
have
all
to
be,
critically think, right?
and you have to critically think. Right.
I worry about that with, maybe generations that aren't as tech savvy, right? Or I also think, because I have two young children, right? And I've thought about how with all the new technology that nothing is believable. My daughter is 4.5 years old, and she asked me the other day if a character she saw on TV was in our world. And it occurred to me how strange this question is, but also just psychologically how you sort of compartmentalize the world around you. And are they part of our world? Is there an alternate world? And it really made me think about, all these technologies and politics and how people take in information, critically think about things. And I mean, what are your thoughts? Like, how do people do that?
Well, when you said that, I thought of Mickey Mouse and how Mickey Mouse was a cartoon, it's a cartoon character, but look at all those incarnations of Mickey and his friends. And so I think it all kind of blurs together. Cartoon characters, action figures. Donald Trump thinks he's Superman. I mean, it's all kind of, I don't know, sort of how we see ourselves in so many ways.
And we hope that as we grow up and we learn more, that we're able to do those critical thinking processes to sort of check, right? Act as this check where you're like, okay, that character on TV is a real person, but they're playing a part, like being able to like understand how to think it through. But some of these things are really tricky, when it comes to AI and, Photoshop. And
it's interesting because first of all, props to your daughter because she's actually asking the questions. So she's asking the right questions, which I think is step one for everyone, is to really, ask those questions and seek out answers from a reputable source like mom. So I think that's really, step one. And then I do want to touch on, I actually just recently watched The Social Dilemma, and it does go into this. I highly recommend it. But it kind of touches on the whole idea of Pizzagate and how dangerous that was, and how, algorithms behind what's behind your computer screen, like it's sending you things that you typically look at. So it really is encouraging that polarization. So you have to also go out and seek out other people's opinions that maybe do differ from your own. And, it can be challenging in this, political climate.
So is Facebook okay or not? I mean, for a while we've had these debates on whether or not they should be regulated more, or if they should take on more responsibility for sort of what, reaping what they've sowed here. Because, we talk about it, people being in bubbles on what they're being fed, but also, is that totally true? I mean, people were in bubbles before as well, right? I mean, you choose which newspaper you were going to read as well.
Or you choose which neighbors you talk to, or which friends you see after church, or which of your kids' friends' mothers you're hanging out with. So I think bubbles are part of what communities are made of. So I still see more benefit from Facebook than negative. I think they could take more responsibility. They could enforce some of their rules a little better and a little more uniformly. But full disclosure, I was early investor in Facebook. So I'm pleased with how the stock has grown.
Oh, I'm sure. Good for
and
you.
I think, billions of people are can't be wrong. And I think there's a value in that community. So I tend to see the glasses half full, and I tend to see these kinds of technologies as filling a need. Exactly. On my Empowered Patient show, I talk a lot to patient advocates, people who are dealing with rare diseases, and Facebook is a lifeline for creating closed communities, providing ways for people to share information and not be confined by geography or time zones. And it makes a big difference in their lives and in the kinds of ways that they're able to help researchers. So I still tend to think that connectivity is a good thing, and we all need to think about community standards.
That's
No,
a
you're
great point,
absolutely
especially in a
right.
pandemic, to try to connect people
Yeah,
even from far away.
yeah, absolutely. So thinking about this as well, so we're thinking about just how research is being done, whether it's a political strategist or voters, like, we're talking about like the text messages that people are sending, or maybe, the quick surveys that are on Facebook. Tell us about a little bit about how you think, current research is being done in politics.
This is a very unusual year, and focus groups are not happening like they have in the past. It's all gone online or telephone. And there was so much disruption in the way budgets were being allocated that they're just kind of throwing money at things, not necessarily testing so much. And there's a lot of money. So there's kind of an abundance of resources, allows people to make more mistakes. Not that they ever really were big on testing in the first place, but now they just, well, let's do this, let's do that,
Yeah,
let's just see what happens. A
yeah,
lot of the political advertising doesn't really go through the same kind of rigorous testing that consumer advertising goes through. A lot of that's because of limited budgets. A lot of that's because it's really a short time that the ads will be seen,
yeah,
not
it's fast.
and there's no like incremental sales. It's like you win or you lose. And
Hmm.
also, there's a lot more ego involved with candidates
Mm,
than with a soda pop or frozen food. So the candidate has to be happy with the ad. The candidate's
mm.
partner has to be happy with the ad. The candidate's friends who are giving money have to be. So there's a lot of factors there that research wouldn't reveal and wouldn't be relevant. So
Yeah, that's really interesting.
this crowd has been a little adverse also to finding out what might be true as opposed to what they think is true.
I've wondered
So
if it's like a microcosm as well of what's going on in the larger consumer space, where people have been making a little bit more of a move towards just testing something digitally because it's really cheap to do. You can just put it out as a Facebook ad and see how it performs for a couple minutes and then pull it if you need
Yeah.
to, right? And then just put up a different one. Do you see like, do you see that a lot? Do they just try things out like that, like
yeah,
you were
yeah,
saying?
absolutely.
And then,
And they do like minor changes, the color, the call to action, the music, the intro, the out, whatever, the length, maybe it's a 15-second versus a 30-second versus a 5-second. So they do, I would say, massage the content.
Mm,
and
yeah.
what do you think the impacts of that are when they're, like you said, massaging that content to kind of evolve into whatever new technology space that they're, trying to apply it in? For example, like TikTok or something.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's being used experimentally on things like TikTok and Facebook, and then it might migrate to TV or to
Mm.
radio, as opposed to the other direction, because you can do it cheaper, faster on social. So there's ways to experiment, which is not as expensive as experimenting with a TV ad.
So what's happening to all that money then, that would have gone towards focus groups and all this research? What do you think
I
is
think
going
they're just buying ads. They're just buying ads wherever they can. And social has been a sort of a place where they've spent money in the past. I get the sense that they're spending a lot more
on?
on social now, and the ads are getting expensive because there's so much demand and so much money, so the costs are also going up. So
Interesting.
I'm getting a lot of direct mail, so I guess campaigns
Yeah.
are saying, well, we've got the bucks, why don't we just send another batch of those big old
Just really dump
postcards?
it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, I do want to switch it a little bit more to just thinking about how Facebook has that I voted filter now. I was curious your thoughts on it in terms of, do you think that's going to replace the I voted sticker? Like, is that kind of almost, because I view that as a social proof to be like, look, I did this, you should all do this too. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's been going on for years. There's always been that sort of go vote and then go tell your friends that you voted to make sure they voted too. I think that peer pressure thing is very important. And I noticed, or I read, that the envelope with my ballot on it from California includes an I voted sticker. So they're trying to replicate the experience even in your own home. And I guess one could take the picture of themselves wearing that sticker and post it. So
I've seen people so far doing that.
yeah, I think that's great. And I think the idea of telling your friends and family and coworkers to vote is just being part of being civically engaged. And I'm all for promotion of the fact that you voted. So it's a little bit of pressure and a little bit of encouragement, I guess, when you tell other people.
Yeah, you could say from even the celebrities here, like John Mayer, I think his caption here is funny about telepathy, like, telepathy. But I just find it interesting because there is that level of influence that someone, like, they still are using people to influence other people, like celebrities, to really get that message across, even if I'm curious to know what you think is more effective. Do you think those seeing that your aunt voted on Facebook, or your cousin voted on Facebook, or something like that, or
influencers?
Yeah.
And that's a great question. I think it's a combination of who you trust. I must admit, I love to vote. I always vote. I've never missed any chance to vote. Recall elections, primaries, off-year elections. I think that's just a thing you do as an American citizen. So I don't understand why people need so much encouragement to vote, especially with all the early voting options that we have available this year. It's, again, one of the silver linings of COVID. So people are just lazy. I think one of the unintended consequences of Donald Trump might be that people are more motivated to vote, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. It's just kind of raised the awareness. So I think there's a lot of factors that go into whether people vote and how they vote. And certainly peer pressure is one of the top three, just in terms of, are you cool? Are you cynical? Can you tell people that you voted that you seem like you're tuned into what's going on? Or are you just kind of ignoring reality?
I mean, back in, the 90s, it was, or even 80s, when MTV really did the whole rock the vote sort of thing, right? And now it's like, to what Kathryn's saying with Facebook, the first thing that comes up is like, have you voted? Did you vote? Did you vote? Did you vote? It's just a little bit of a change, on how that's going. But then when you think about, like, here you're looking at like Instagram or something where you have influencers, in our consumer sector, they really can influence what you buy. Like, it can really make or break a brand depending on who is the person that's sort of hawking it on Instagram. So do you think like John Mayer is going to have like a huge influence that might have been bigger if we didn't have Instagram?
Yeah, I think so, because they have so many followers, and even if just a small percentage of those people vote that might not otherwise, then it's a good thing, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
I've actually heard that I believe it was one of the Jenners, it was either Kendall or Kylie, she posted something just saying to go vote, and it broke that website, and it had the jump, and it was I think 1,500% more people were engaging on that website than they had the day before. So I think that's a testament to, there is some influence there. Would you agree, Karen?
Yeah, absolutely. And, back to what you were saying, Michelle, before about how our brains are sort of wired to do certain things. Maybe, Kathryn, to your point, our brains are wired to do what our friends are doing because for whatever reason, we want to be like them. And so maybe those people that we really look up to, whether they're Hollywood stars or, sports stars or whatever, those role models really might have an influence on our brains in ways we might not really even understand, but they could influence whether you smoke a cigarette, whether you buckle your seatbelt, whether you drink and drive, all those things that candidates have relied on in the past for, endorsements of one sort or another. This person stands for this, so you believe them, so you should vote for me because they believe in me. And in this case, they're not even telling you to vote for a candidate. They're just saying go out there and vote. So that's even easier ask, I think, than go out and vote for, Joe Biden
That's a
or
really good point.
whoever.
It seems more authentic, and I think that that's a huge problem with influencers, is that sometimes they're not seen as being authentic because people know they're being paid, right? That's interesting. So what other trends do you see coming up in how politics going digitally? Are people trusting the polls anymore? Like, are those relevant like they used to be? I've kind of wondered about that since the last election. How's polling going? Like, what's changing in our future of how digital politics or politics in general are going to be done?
Well, that's another great question. I think the whole idea of canvassing and walking the neighborhood is a big opportunity for update. Though there'll still be a lot of that. There'll be some perhaps new virtual walking of the neighborhood or more virtual, sort of coffees or whatever the get together with the candidate used to be called, but more of that
card
online.
Parades lately. I'm in Pennsylvania, and so it's a swing state. And they had, I think just end of last week, they had a Truckers for Trump parade, basically. They've had the boat parades. We just had a local Democratic candidate go through our neighborhood yesterday. It was like a train of cars that all had the signs that were just kind of like with the COVID birthday parties where you go by and you honk, but now they're going through neighborhoods. So maybe that's kind of like what you're talking about there, where it's, you don't get to actually physically go hang out with the candidate necessarily, but maybe these sort of like drive-by candidacies.
Perhaps, but that's a good example of where there might be some convergence, where they put the word out on Facebook or Twitter, and that got everybody sort of energized and mobilized, and people shared the information, and by golly, they had 500 cars or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So, it's like the old and new converging ways, but perhaps in new ways than in the past, but sort of amped up a bit, maybe more by the technology.
Yeah.
So,
like those train, because I guess like back in like the 1800 or something, when
exactly.
like they get on the train and go through all the states, right?
Right.
Yeah. Oh,
right.
Interesting.
And stop and wave or stop and get off and meet the crowd and get back on the train and keep going. I think there's a lot of things that have been established in the political campaign world which haven't been challenged much over the last 50 years or so. And polls are one of those things that are just, accepted. So I think there's an opportunity to sort of shake things up a little bit now because there's uncertainty. And, ask me after the election whether the polls were accurate this year.
I'm excited to do that. Yeah.
We're hearing some of the same story that we heard when Clinton was running against Trump. So hopefully
I know I've been following 538 on it, and he gets a lot of criticism, but he's been posting a lot about the accuracy of results and sort of which polls are more trustworthy than others. And I think that that's something that people have started questioning a lot more, perhaps.
Right. And I'm always a little bit leery of averaging poll results. I think I'm not as scientific as perhaps people think it is. So, but you're more the expert on statistics than I. So, again, I think
hard.
And polls need to be augmented by other means. And again, HCD's ability to measure this sort of subconscious element of people's reaction to things, I think shouldn't be discounted at all. If anything, it should be included more in the well, because I hate to see all these candidates raising so much money and then wasting the money on things that aren't persuading people to vote for them or even to vote in general. So I'm all for good use of those short resources, limited resources.
Totally agree. I think this has been a really interesting conversation. I think any one of these points we could probably go on with for hours. But I think there is a lot that's changing out there, and it's so interesting to sort of see how everything is changing, the psychology of it, the neuroscience of it, the statistics of it, and just the politics of it, right? It's kind of fun and exciting. But thank you so much, Karen, for joining us. As always, everybody, please subscribe to this YouTube channel and comment below. So subscribe, like, and comment, as we like to say. And as we also like to say, does your product meet a promise? Please just prove it. And that's why we kind of do these conversations, so that we can talk about how you can go about proving it, having a better understanding, learning a bit about something. And thank you so much, Karen. If anybody would like to get in touch with any of us, our information is provided here. You can link with us on LinkedIn. Obviously, subscribe and like and comment on YouTube, visit our blog, and tweet with us. Kathryn, did you have something you wanted to add here?
Nope, just, check out our, like you said, check out our YouTube, check out our LinkedIn. We're always happy to connect with you. I know Karen is very active on, LinkedIn, and she is also, she's, as she mentioned, she has many podcasts that she is also producing.
We'll put links for those in the description here. So just below, you should be able to link to any of her podcasts, maybe even find her books. And thank you so much. This has been really cool.
Thank you, ladies. I appreciate it.
Yep. Last thing, everyone, please go vote.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Until next time.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.